It was George Benyon that said, "No film should ever be silent." Hey, popcorn. Thank you. Silence in film has for a long time been a very valuable tool in sound. The sudden cessation of sound is appreciated by many to have a very dramatic effect on its audience. This is evident in many films. Take, for example, this clip from the new Star Trek. Dramatic silence can have effect on action, romance, comedy, horror, and numerous other genres and emotional outcomes. And it can add even more than sounds can, potentially. However, when silence is all that one hears, the emotion that sound adds is dramatically absent. Music has been an integral part of cinema since even before dialogue and music were employed in the editing process. Silent films were primary in the history of cinema worldwide, however, so was sound. Orchestral pits used to set up and play right there in the back of the theaters in order to heighten the emotion of scenes. Also, the importance of dialogue was not forgotten, as people would utilize their own voices and inner ears when reading subtitles. Andy Warhol made silent films in the 60s under the notion that the audience would provide the sound and participate in the artistic experience. This idea was very big in India and still somewhat exists. Many notions have risen as to why sound needed to accompany film during the days of silent cinema. Perhaps to do the opposite of what Warhol wanted. Or maybe to mask sounds of the outside world bleeding into the theater. The sounds of the projector, or even sounds of the audience itself. Whew. It's a good movie. Mervyn Cook says that silence gives way to aesthetic perplexity, meaning that too much silence was unsettling. Take, for instance, this scene from Final Destination. Now, while this scene may be unsettling with or without sound, one cannot deny the aesthetic perplexity and the desire to hear it all. So one can see that silence has not always been an effective tool in film and sound design. Rather, the soundtrack created effective silence because it gave it a value that it did not possess before that. This means that sound has always been necessary in film. One must keep in mind the idea that Lumiere and Baker present that music is subjective. Therefore, the outcome depends on the person listening. Everyone's inner ear registers a different emotion or feeling when they hear a sound. Semiotics says that any type of feeling, any emotion, any state of consciousness is a response to an internal or external stimulus. Coker explains some of these basic semiotic reactions, claiming that there are 3 temporal spatial dimensions in which we process these thoughts. The first is predictive, which is dealing with anticipations or expectations. The second, retrodictive, dealing with recollections or previous happenings. And the third is juxtadictive, which is dealing with current happenings. The elaboration likelihood model suggests that depending on how an individual processes messages, habits are formed. Percy Buck furthers this point by saying that, as with anything, sooner or later people start to learn the best way of doing things. They start to learn the easiest, most sensible way to go about thinking. Now, in thinking like a filmmaker, Arnold Paris reminds us that once one realizes how our brains systemize these thoughts in our heads, then that person can think of the best way to elicit a certain reaction or break a certain habit. If images can be rearranged to make people think a certain way, then the oral accompaniment, if treated in the same manner, should be able to have proportional power. When combined, the power of the visual and oral component can persuade an audience to feel any number of ways without even realizing that they are. Let's take, for example, this juxtaposition. This simple juxtaposition reaffirms what formalism suggests, that when combined, elements of a film or persuasive message are much more effective. Here are 4 completely unrelated images of myself, a small dog, a toilet, and a computer and lamp on a desk. However, when juxtaposed one after the other, we begin to feel as if I love the dog, am longing for the toilet, and want to own or sit behind the computer and lamp. But if we add just one sound effect that comes across as dissonant or unpleasant, all of a sudden one feels as if I find the small dog unappealing, as if I think the toilet is gross, or that I may regard the lamp as too bright or oppressive. George Burt explained that this is exactly what film music should do. It should employ drama using certain techniques in order to achieve a certain specific emotional outcome.